I needed at least 12 more of those fancy jumps off the horse.
Why is it you're always causing some sort of commotion?
I don't cause commotions, I am one.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel, I talk about entertainment media. I'm going to be reviewing Wicked Part 1 today, but if you haven't already watched my video about the Wicked book, I would recommend that you watch that first, simply because there is a possibility that I will refer back to things I already mentioned in there, and I don't know if it will translate as confusing without that context. Normally, I don't do spoiler reviews without a spoiler-free section on opening weekend, but considering that this film is based on a book that I already read and did a video on, and that was a video that included plot spoilers, and then this movie is an adaptation of a musical that has already been around for decades at this point, I'm not quite as concerned with trying to tiptoe around the details. If you only want a rating, as I posted on my Letterboxd, I logged this film at a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so it skews more positive than negative, but in my private list of 2024 films that I maintain to keep track of what it is that I've watched within a calendar year in order to help me prepare for the inevitable top 10 video that every film reviewer posts at the end of the year, Wicked Part 1 is currently sitting somewhere in the middle chunk of that list. For the context, I've been vaguely familiar with the Wicked musical for a while because it has a considerable amount of name recognition. I had some idea of the basic plot and I knew some of the songs, but I never saw the full musical live from start to finish. Even when I was either visiting or living in large cities where it might be playing, I never got around to seeing it. Depending on the city, going to live theater can be quite expensive. I would go to theater more often when I was in London, but I didn't see as many musicals while there as I did plays. I more so grew up watching movie musicals, so I'm definitely particular about movie musicals specifically. The main details I was interested in for the Wicked movie going into watching it were Jon M directing, Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero, because he happens to be someone that I have seen in a live musical before, to what extent there would be the more serious material from the book, and more broadly speaking, I was and am still hoping that the Wicked films will be commercially successful because I want for there to be more movie musicals to get funded, and the way I see it, it makes no difference whether or not I love the Wicked films, because if it's successful, it will still help the genre overall. Other artists that are trying to secure funding for their movie musical projects would be able to use Wicked as a point of reference when they make their pitches and hopefully be able to get more for their budget as a result. Dix the musical was a lot of fun to watch, but imagine how much more they could have potentially accomplished if instead of $8 million they had been given a budget of something like 10 or 15 million. But when it comes to Wicked, my feedback is a bit of a mixed bag. Jon M is a director I'm interested in seeing work on new projects because his track record has given me enough things to pique my interest, and that has not changed regardless of my mixed or lukewarm feedback about Wicked Part 1. I'm aware he's spoken a fair bit about wanting to use the film's budget in order to create a lot of practical elements for these films, with things like sets, set pieces, the poppy field, and many of those elements are ones that I like. However, with the film being as long as it is, I had a lot of time while watching it to figure out certain opinions of mine, and one of those is that a considerable amount of the film doesn't look good, or at least it does not live up to the standard I required for a movie musical with this level of money behind it, and from a filmmaker that is aiming to bring that level of grandiose spectacle that we used to see from movie musicals, particularly during that golden era of the Hollywood musical. And this is actually very simple for me to explain the point that I have. The most iconic of Hollywood musicals were filmed in Technicolor. The technology of Technicolor was such that it required extremely bright lighting to work, and it would result in extremely saturated coloring. The Wicked film received a fair bit of criticism where people were judging the trailers and promotional clips, but I didn't address that when I made my video about the Wicked book because I wanted to wait and see the film and decide for myself if there was an actual issue or if the promotional clips were simply translating poorly on mobile devices. And now, having seen it on the big screen, yeah, it was absolutely diabolical to light, or should I say not light, this film properly, because there were so many shots or scenes where a character is singing something that is supposed to dazzle the viewer. And all I could think while watching it is, why can we not get some proper lighting for this character in this moment? If you want me to appreciate this choreography or the energy that this performer is putting into emoting this particular song, why can you not give them lighting that gives this the razzle dazzle that it deserves? I do appreciate that Jon cared about building more practical sets and set pieces instead of relying on rushed, sloppy VFX work that forces even more VFX artists to inevitably quit the industry because of how dire their work working conditions are. But what good does it do to get giant set pieces that are only going to be on screen for a few seconds when I've still got 2 hours and 40 minutes of bad lighting that negatively impacts the entirety of what it is that is being looked at? You've gone so far as to stylize the font for the title cards to make it look more old-fashioned and have the credits presented in slides instead of rolling text. So I know that you're aiming to pay homage to the Technicolor era of movie musicals. Furthermore, the incessant marketing campaign has been dominated with pink and green. Why are we not doing a color grading or filming in such a way that would capture the colors so that they fully pop on screen? If there is time to do more work on the edit for part 2, I implore the people involved to fix the color grading, because if part 2 looks as washed out as this one, I will probably be more harsh in my feedback. And as one other point of feedback, I want to remind people that there are iconic examples of Technicolor dance numbers where you have minimal sets and set pieces, but you have a really pretty backdrop, and the power of the performers themselves is sufficient enough to dazzle the audience, and all of it happens under the veneer of that glorious, vibrant Technicolor. If budgeting is the issue, you could have perhaps been more selective in which sets and set pieces you wanted to have built, or maybe you could figure out a more economic approach to building some of those pieces, and then you could have instead redirected some of that funding towards lights. If I wanted to see bad lighting, I would watch any number of television series being made right now, or a direct-to-streaming film. But now that I've aired out one of my largest, if not my absolute largest grievance with the film, particularly since it's an issue that spans more or less the entire runtime, I can speak about a positive element: Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero. If I wanted to frame this portion of the review as a complaint, it would simply be that I needed so much more Fiyero because Jonathan Bailey was stealing the scene every single time he was present. When the film first began, I was watching and taking in the material, fairly stone-faced, adding various things scribbled into my notes, and it wasn't until Jonathan Bailey showed up and did a fancy jump off the back of his horse that my jaw dropped, and suddenly I was awake, I was alert, I was engaged, and I was invested, at least in him. It is absolutely unreal how this man has phenomenal chemistry with basically every leading lady I've seen him with. I was frustrated that the Fiyero Elphaba sparks didn't start to fully flare up until the end of the film, and now I'm going to have to wait for another year to see the entirety of that relationship arc. Although I still overall vastly prefer the story from the book, as a romance girly, I do look forward to seeing a version of the Elphaba and Fiyero love story that does not end with both of them dead, with most of their family members also being dead. And as soon as the characters went to the library and I saw those rotating gears, I went, wait a minute, what are we in the Snowpiercer train right now? And it took only a minute or two for Jonathan Bailey's musical number to kick off, and I went, oh, finally, we have a show! Man was doing full choreo with flips and everything. If I were to hone in on some of the key moments in Wicked Part 1 that actually really worked for me on an emotional level, there are two that come to mind, and to be honest, I feel like this is just further proof of my film bias and my love for film as a medium, because the moments I have in mind were ones with little to no dialogue. It was about the camera getting up close and personal and capturing the subtext and the nuance of acting on camera. In sequential order, the first part that worked extremely well for me was Cynthia as Elphaba at the dance when she's doing this sort of lyrical contemporary movement, and she's not saying a word. She's just expressing her emotions through her face and her body. It was stunning, exquisite work. I was terribly annoyed that she was making me feel so many emotions. Don't make me get misty-eyed now. And the other part was where she's falling off of the building and she sees in her reflection on the side of the building little baby Elphaba, who, by the way, was adorable. That was an incredibly effective, emotionally resonant moment because of both of the actors performing the character in the way that they did. And that's actually a perfect segue into talking a little bit about the backstory. I really appreciated that they showed some of that in the film. It's by no means as thorough as the book is in explaining Elphaba's origins, but it was still extremely important to have that in order to deepen the audience's understanding of what Elphaba has experienced and how it's shaped her into the person we know her to be. There was also some very clever work to conceal the plot twist about Elphaba's lineage for any casual moviegoers who don't know the story, but of course, as someone who read the book and also has read the plot summary for the stage version, I am well aware of who her birth father is. That was also a smart way to thread things together with having him him say in the film some sort of line about how he always wanted to be a father. So when viewers will go back and rewatch both films, they'll be able to go, oh wow, they were telling us the whole time, but I didn't pick up on that until after it had been revealed. I actually want to circle back to another detail about where budget was being spent. I really didn't like the choice to have the animals be VFX. I really would have preferred that you just put actors into creature makeup. I'm going to pull a recent reference. That new holiday film people keep dragging, the one starring The Rock and Chris Evans, Red One, people are acting like that's the worst film they've ever seen. It wasn't great for me, but I didn't consider it to be as bad as everyone seems to be making it out to be. But in that film, there's a sequence where the lead actors go to see Krampus at his castle, and Krampus is presented by way of an actor in prosthetics and a bodysuit, and he looked incredible. He was the best looking thing in that entire film. And it was really making me feel nostalgic for that 2000s Guillermo del Toro movie magic, you know, things like Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, and the animals would have looked much better in Wicked and packed more of an emotional punch in the narrative if they had been actors in special makeup. I'm sorry, you want to cast a dramatic actor as skilled as Peter Dinklage to play Dr. Dillamond, only to have him voice a hyper-realistic style of goat character with minimal emotional range in his face rendering. The fascist brutalization and oppression of the story is centered on animals with a capital A, and it's not having the impact that it should on film because of the creative choices that you made. Anyway, my recommendation is to go watch the Krampus scenes from Red One because Krampus was serving charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. As for the other performers, I've already complimented Jonathan Bailey as Fiyero and Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba. For Ariana Grande as Glinda, it's very obvious that she was very excited to be in the project and that she was putting as much effort in as possible. And I feel like when I think about the biggest standout moment for her, there is of course the emotionally impactful moment I mentioned before that happens at the dance. That moment continues to where those two characters are finally able to reconcile their prior disagreements, at least enough to be able to bond and become friends. But on the more showy side of that spectrum, of course, it has to be the popular number. Lots of choreography, lots of traveling all over the set of their room and the hallway outside of it. And I'm not trying to take away from everything that she put into this number, but I have to point out that once again, the lighting was bothering me a lot. This woman was giving this musical number 110%, and yet you've got shots where the light is coming into the frame from behind her, so it's diminishing my ability to have a clear, unobstructed view of her. The one musical number, or at least a portion of a musical number, where I felt like I was seeing the high level of prestige visual design that I was expecting to see, it has to be the one where the wizard was standing behind a curtain and they have the spotlight so you just see his silhouette. Oh my god, that was exactly what I was wanting from a movie musical released in 2024 with a budget this enormous. Another point of positive feedback, I don't know if this had been spoiled or not, maybe I saw the information about this and I simply forgot. I have no idea either way. But when Kristen Chenoweth and Adele Dazeem popped up, oh, I was ready to rejoice. The charisma, the vocals, the energy, oh, I was having a fabulous time. I wish those two had been around for even more musical numbers. That probably wouldn't have made sense for the plot, but who cares about this horrible, watered down plot that... The book is so much better. Why? And that actually brings me to my final gripe, which is that I had never really thought about the Wicked plot far enough to put together what's really going on during Defying Gravity. I just knew, oh yeah, it's a really nice dramatic song that when sung well is really enjoyable to experience because it requires large vocals, and Cynthia definitely delivered those. But following my experience of reading the book and seeing how badly the plot was watered down for the stage musical, now that I thread everything together with seeing what's really going on between Elphaba and Glinda during that song, I'm horrified. You're trying to fight fascism from taking over. You're trying to find a way to liberate an oppressed group from being rounded up and put in cages. And you ask your friend to come with you and she's all, no thanks, girlie, I'm going to stay and hang out with the architects and purveyors of that fascism. And all you have to say to her in response is, I hope it brings you bliss. I hope you're happy in the end. Absolutely not. If you're going to side with the oppressors, Glinda, you're going on trial at the ICC too. Enjoy your prison cell. See how you like living trapped behind bars. And it's such a shame too, because that's by far the one song in this musical that I might have considered listening to after the fact. But having that narrative taint my impression of it, no thank you. I will listen instead to Come Out Ye Black and Tans, or perhaps Untan by Bashar Murad. So overall, to reiterate, mixed feedback on Wicked Part 1, leaning more positive than negative. I hope hope this becomes a hit at the box office though, because I really do want to see more movie musicals on the big screen. Watching part 1 mostly just made me want to rewatch In the Heights, since that was a vastly superior showcase of Jon M. Chu's artistic vision. And as a bonus, Marissa Bode, friend of the channel. And if you haven't already read the book, I do recommend it. This is the copy I have from my local library, which I will now be able to return since I'm wrapping up my coverage of this project until part 2 comes out. But the next thing on my to-read list...
I'm a bitch, I'm a boss, I'm a bitch and a boss, I'm a shine like